what NASA says, and I don't expect that the lander will last for a long time. I may be wrong, but I don't think so.
You mean something's going to happen to it like has happened to other probes?
Yes, I believe so. I believe and you know what, Mars has a great attraction, not only for John McCain, for example, who says that we have to have a human being there soon,
right,
but for example, Russia and China, who are joining efforts together to send another probe to Mars, I think in the next few years, and Phobos as well. They know, just like we do, like they know in Washington, that there is something there. That's why all the haste to get there and to find out what's going on.
Then back to the story then of not just what's going on other planets, but beneath ours, and maybe there's a connection between the two. I'll leave that up to Paul Stonehill to put together. But in the lake, in this deep water lake in Kyrgyzstan, there was rumors of a city, a submerged city, and stories of swimmers who were swimming without any type of scuba gear or any helmet on their head. They were just coming up from the water, and they were described as having extra long ears. Does that sound right?
Yes, this was a long time ago. This was in ancient times. In 1982, the military command in the area of the lake, were warned by higher ups from Siberia not to try to capture anything in the lake. Anything consisted of the swimmers, so-called swimmers that were sighted, and an attempt was made to actually to capture them in 1982. What they found out, when the Soviets were conducting military training dives for their frogmen, they found so-called swimmers who looked very human-like, and they were of enormous, huge size, about 9 feet tall. They had tight-fitting silver suits. They had no artificial means of breathing, no aqualungs, no other equipment. They had round helmets that were concealed their heads. When the Soviets tried to capture them, they made a decision to capture them. They lost a number of their people because they were thrown out from the deep lake. I mean, Lake Baikal is one of the deepest lakes in the world. They were thrown out, and there was no decompression, process, nothing. And these people died. So the Soviets had decided not to attempt to do anything like that anymore. It's just like shooting at a UFO that has been done throughout Soviet history for a while. You get burned. So they decided to warn their other people not to do it. Apparently they knew about the Issyk-Kul Lake. Something was going on there. Besides that, Mark Steinberg, the gentleman who brought out the story, also reported that a special bulletin from the engineering forces of the USSR was shown to them, to the officers in the area, and it had sightings of UFOs coming from deep water lakes, in and out, appearances of underwater creatures very similar to the Baikal type, and other information. Now, I've been collecting for years, reports of the so-called USOs, underwater, unidentified submersible objects, and it's fascinating. Right. But I don't want to get off from the case. Somebody named Mikhail Demidenko, who was a Soviet writer, who was a very interesting human being, who could speak Chinese fluently, and who had traveled to Far East in his life. He had confirmed this story. Unfortunately, he died 5 years ago. He had confirmed the story of the Baikal Lake incident because he was in the area in '86 and he spoke to the people. He didn't know that it had happened, but in 1986 he had spoken with the local people, and they told him this story. Then he read about it 6 years later, and he was shocked. Now, he knew about so-called giants from his travels in Tibet. He was one of the few people who had actually been to Tibet and had spoken to the monks and other people there back in 1950s. And they told him about giants that sleep in the caves of Tibet, in the mountains of Tibet, of the same exact size, and they had an anesthesia-induced sleep, that they would wake up one day. He also found out that the Red Chinese military had entered one of the caves, and they basically removed the sleeping amphibian giants and hanged them. We're dealing in 1950s. This is a different situation, and I don't know how they would handle it today. But at that time, it was probably religious propaganda for them, so they decided to get rid of them. Just keep in mind, Nazis obviously knew about similar legends. This is why Hitler kept sending one expedition after another, and it was very interesting history. So not only from that part of the world, and not only from that period, I have information about the so-called giants. What I got interested in was the report from the Soviet Setka, Military Research of UFOs program.
Right.
And they had a story that it was in I believe in the same year, 1982, about a sighting of a similar humanoid giant that was, cited, and this was reported. And the scientist who had done it, he is still active in Russia, and he is one of those scientists who don't discount the existence of UFOs, but actually studies them. Now, he was part of the Soviet secret military research program Setka. That one, and there was another confirmation back in 2000. That came from the Russian counterintelligence, who had been active in the Far East. Far East is an area of continuous UFO sightings, whether back in the Soviet times or now. And they also report, story of the gigantic beings, same silvery clothing, 2.5 meters tall or taller, and they were sighted also. And believe me, there are many more reports. It's just those are the ones that I was able to put together, and get it published. And there is much more. The Soviet and Russian naval intelligence has incredible files. Just what I had been able to read that came out from the open sources. My hair stands up. I mean, reports of the gigantic objects chasing submarines underwater. Discs coming in and out, gigantic discs that look blimp-like objects in the skies over into the Pacific Ocean. And Soviet intelligence had sighted much of it. And some of it we were able to get our hands on during the perestroika times, and even recently some information came out.
It's fascinating to me, and yet when you say information, sometimes, those are just great stories. So how can we ever know more than just what seems like, a good story, something that is fun to report, something which is fun to look into, but comes right down to it, some lonely guys on a boat somewhere? No, sources, head of the Pacific Fleet counterintelligence, people like Ajaja and others. Also, I can spend the next hour and a half or 2 hours giving you names of the Russian military officials, or if you want to talk about UFOs, I can give you names and dates of the top military command who came out with reports of gigantic discs over Moscow, I believe, late 1990s, and how they were trying to, if not capture them, at least to understand what they are. You have to consider the source. If it's, like I said, somebody, a lonely fisherman, that's something else. If you are, if I mention I had, somebody from the intelligence or the military command, you tend to believe them because these people don't want to lose their reputation. They have pensions to think about. I knew somebody who lived in Encino. He had a neighbor, a former U.S. admiral. And he told my acquaintance, he says, I can't. The Code of Military Justice does not allow me to reveal information. But we had seen, and he started telling about USOs that the Americans had seen in the waters of, different oceans of the planet. Well, I love the USO stories, and I've seen some pretty interesting things myself on them, and I look forward to getting some video or something, anything that could verify these. The story you told, for example, about the Deepwater Lake and the big guys with the ears. I know this is going to sound really awful, so I'm not trying to pick a fight,
Sure.
but it sounds a lot like Jar Jar Binks in Star Wars Episode 1.